Gaming history is littered with hidden gems and overlooked masterpieces that time has unfairly pushed aside. These games broke new ground, captivated players, and influenced the industry in ways we're still feeling today. So, in this video, we'll take a look at these legendary games that you may have already forgotten. Without further ado, let's get started. First off, we have Max Payne. Man, this game was something else. Remember when bullet time was the coolest thing ever? Max Payne didn't just use it, it perfected it. This game had you popping painkillers and diving through the air in slow motion, taking out bad guys left and right. The story was dark, gritty, and had more twists than a pretzel factory. And those graphic, novel-style cutscenes? They're pure genius. It's crazy to think that this game came out way back in 2001. It spawned 2 sequels, but let's be real, the original Max Payne hit different. Speaking of hitting, did you know that the long-rumored Max Payne remake is actually happening? Remedy Entertainment, the original developers, are teaming up with Rockstar Games to bring this classic back to life. No release date yet, but you bet I'm keeping my eyes peeled for more news. If they can capture even a fraction of what made the original so special, we're in for a treat. Vanquish flew under the radar for a lot of people, but holy moly, was it a wild ride. Platinum Games, the masters of stylish action, cranked everything up to 11 with this one. You're this dude in a high-tech suit, power sliding, and rocket boosting your way through hordes of robots. The action was so fast and frantic, it made other shooters look like they were moving in slow motion. And that boss fight where you're battling on top of a speeding train was pure adrenaline. Vanquish kind of got lost in the shuffle when it came out in 2010, competing with bigger names in the shooter genre, but for those who played it, it left an indelible mark. There's been some chatter about a potential sequel over the years, but nothing concrete. Platinum Games has been busy with other projects, like the upcoming Project GG, but who knows? Maybe they'll revisit this gem someday. In the meantime, if you missed out on Vanquish back in the day, there's a remastered version available on modern platforms. Trust me, it still holds up. Next up, we have Need for Speed Most Wanted. And no, not the 2012 one. I'm talking about the 2005 classic. This game was the pinnacle of arcade racing, combining high-octane pursuits with an open world that felt alive and dangerous. The Blacklist system, where you had to take down increasingly tough rival racers, was genius. It gave the game a structure that kept you coming back for more. And let's not forget that insane intro sequence with the BMW M3 GTR. That car became iconic, and for good reason. Most Wanted nailed the feeling of being an outlaw street racer like no other game before or since. It's a shame that subsequent Need for Speed games never quite captured that same magic. There have been rumors swirling about a potential remake or remaster of this classic. EA has been bringing back older NFS titles recently, like Hot Pursuit, so there's hope. But even if it never happens, the original Most Wanted will always hold a special place in racing game history. Prototype is like that crazy action movie that throws logic out the window in favor of pure, unadulterated mayhem, and it works. This game took the open world formula and injected it with a healthy dose of superhuman abilities and body horror. You play as Alex Mercer. This dude could shapeshift his body into weapons and consume people to gain their memories and abilities. The sheer chaos you could unleash on New York City was unparalleled. Sprinting up skyscrapers, gliding across the skyline, and turning your arms into giant blade whips. It was insane in the best possible way. The story was a bit convoluted, sure, but who cared when you were basically a superhero and a supervillain rolled into one? Prototype got a sequel in 2012, but after that, the series went dark. Activision still holds the rights, but they've been silent on any potential revivals. It's a shame because the core concept of Prototype still feels fresh and unique. With today's hardware, imagine the mayhem we could create. Here's hoping someone at Activision remembers this gem and decides to give it another shot. Midnight Club 3 screeched onto the gaming scene like a neon-lit comet, leaving a trail of burnt rubber and pounding bass lines in its wake. Rockstar San Diego absolutely nailed it with this one. The open world street racing, the customization options, the killer soundtrack, everything just clicked. You could cruise around 3 massive cities, each with its own vibe and challenges. And the variety of race types kept things fresh, from ordered races to highway loops that had you frantically weaving through traffic. Moreover, the Dub Edition brought in real-world car culture, letting you trick out your ride with actual branded parts. It was like the Fast and the Furious, but you were in control. Sadly, we haven't seen a new Midnight Club since 2008's Los Angeles. Rockstar's been busy with other franchises, but man, the racing game scene just isn't the same without Midnight Club. There have been whispers and hopes for a revival, especially after some leaks hinted at a possible return. But for now, Midnight Club 3 remains the high-water mark for street racing games. If you've still got a PS2 or original Xbox lying around, dust it off and give this classic a spin. You won't regret it. Final Fantasy XII broke the mold when it hit the PlayStation 2 back in 2006. This entry in the beloved JRPG series dared to be different, introducing the controversial Gambit system that allowed players to program their party's AI. Some praised its innovation, while others missed the traditional turn-based combat. The game's political storyline felt more grounded and mature compared to previous entries, focusing on the machinations of empires rather than world-ending threats. It was actually good, but here's the thing. Final Fantasy XII came out right as the PS3 was launching. Talk about bad timing. It got overshadowed by the shiny new console hype, and a lot of folks missed out. Sure, it got a remaster with the Zodiac Age, but it's still not talked about nearly as much as other Final Fantasy titles, which is a crying shame because Final Fantasy XII was pushing boundaries and trying new things when the series really needed it. It's the kind of game that, if it came out today, would probably be hailed as a revolutionary JRPG. Instead, it's often left out of conversations about the best Final Fantasy games. But for those who've played it, Final Fantasy XII stands as a testament to what can happen when a long-running series takes a big swing. This game is a masterclass in creativity. Full stop. Double Fine took the platformer genre and turned it on its head, letting us literally dive into people's minds. Each level wasn't just a new environment. It was a whole new set of rules, a window into a character's psyche. It's the kind of game that could only come from the mind of Tim Schafer. But here's the thing. Psychonauts was ahead of its time. It came out in 2005 when the market was saturated with mascot platformers. People saw the cartoony art style and assumed it was just another kid's game. They couldn't have been more wrong. Psychonauts dealt with heavy themes like mental health, childhood trauma, and government conspiracies, all wrapped up in a whimsical package. It sold poorly at launch, becoming a cult classic over time. The sequel took 16 years to materialize, which speaks volumes about how the industry often overlooks true innovation. Psychonauts is a shining example of how games can be both fun and profound, silly and serious. It's a game that deserves to be in every conversation about the evolution of storytelling in video games. Beyond Good and Evil emerged as a hidden gem in 2003, showcasing the visionary talents of Michel Ancel. This game was doing the whole investigative journalist uncovers conspiracy thing long before it was cool. Ubisoft took a big risk with this one, blending genres and creating a unique world filled with animal-human hybrids and alien threats. The game's mix of stealth, puzzle solving, and combat was seamless, and Jade remains one of gaming's most underrated protagonists. But Beyond Good and Evil was a commercial flop when it first hit shelves. It was competing with heavy hitters like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, which is ironically another Ubisoft title, and got lost in the shuffle. The gaming world wasn't ready for something this different. Over time, it gained a devoted following, but it's still not as widely known as it should be. The long-teased sequel has been in development hell for years, which only adds to the original's mystique. Beyond Good and Evil represents a road not taken in game design, a blend of genres and ideas that, if it had been more successful, might have changed the course of action-adventure games. Valkyria Chronicles is the strategy game that should have spawned a massive franchise, but instead became a niche favorite. Sega took a big swing with this one, blending turn-based strategy with real-time action in a way we hadn't seen before. The watercolor art style was a breath of fresh air in a genre often defined by gritty realism. And the alternate World War II setting, it opened up storytelling possibilities that most war games wouldn't touch. But Valkyria Chronicles was a slow burn. It came out early in the PS3's life cycle when a lot of folks were still gaming on PS2. The unique gameplay was a tough sell for people used to traditional RPGs or strategy games. It gained a following over time, leading to sequels, but none quite captured the magic of the original. The series has been quiet for a while now, relegated to the status of cult favorite rather than the flagship franchise it could have been. Valkyria Chronicles' legacy can be seen in games that followed, proving that there's always room for innovation in the strategy RPG genre. Its blend of tactical depth and character-driven storytelling continues to inspire both developers and players alike. Killzone Liberation is the forgotten gem of the PSP library. While everyone was focused on the main Killzone games on PlayStation consoles, this little spin-off was quietly revolutionizing portable gaming. Liberation took the gritty sci-fi war of Killzone and transformed it into a top-down tactical shooter. It was a bold move that paid off in spades. The PSP was struggling to deliver console-quality experiences, but Liberation proved it could be done. The controls were tight, the action was intense, and the multiplayer was shockingly good for a handheld game of its time. But here's the kicker. Liberation came out in 2006, right as the PSP was losing steam to the Nintendo DS. It got overlooked by many, relegated to hidden gem status. With Sony out of the handheld game these days, titles like Liberation risk being lost to time. It's a shame because Liberation showed how a big franchise could successfully transition to a completely different genre and platform. It's the kind of game that, if it came out on Switch today, would probably be hailed as a brilliant spin-off. Instead, it's a footnote in the Killzone franchise, remembered fondly by few, but forgotten by many. Patapon drummed up a unique rhythm on the PSP, blending music and strategy in a way gaming hadn't seen before. This quirky title put players in charge of a tribe of eyeball creatures, commanding them through battle with infectious drum beats. Its silhouette art style and catchy tunes masked a surprisingly deep strategy game. Patapon's genius lay in how it made complex gameplay feel accessible. Anyone could tap out a basic rhythm, but mastering the intricacies of combat required real skill. The game spawned 2 sequels, each adding layers to the formula without losing the core charm. Despite critical acclaim, Patapon never quite broke into the mainstream. It remained a cult favorite, beloved by those who played it, but unknown to many. The recent PS4 remasters introduced the series to a new generation, but Patapon still sits on the fringes of gaming consciousness. It's a prime example of the creative risks developers were willing to take during the PSP era, pushing the boundaries of what handheld gaming could be. Shadow Fight 2 threw a punch for mobile gaming, proving that smartphones could deliver a deep fighting game experience. This side-scrolling brawler used silhouette graphics to create a distinct visual style, allowing for fluid martial arts animations without taxing mobile hardware. But Shadow Fight 2's real knockout was its depth. A full equipment system, varied fighting styles, and a storyline that kept players engaged beyond just the next fight. It struck a balance between accessibility for casual players and enough complexity to satisfy fighting game veterans. The game's success spawned a franchise, but the original remains a high watermark for mobile fighting games. Shadow Fight 2 showed that with the right design, mobile platforms could offer experiences rivaling traditional gaming systems. Trine wove a magical thread through the fabric of indie gaming, combining puzzle platforming with cooperative play in a fantasy setting. The game's physics-based puzzles and the ability to switch between 3 distinct characters set it apart from other platformers of its time. Trine's lush storybook visuals and soothing narration created an atmosphere that was a joy to inhabit. The series has continued with Trine 5, but the original still holds a special magic. It's like the developers bottled up a fairy tale and let you play through it. Yet Trine often slips under the radar in discussions about influential indie games. LEGO Marvel Superheroes is like comfort food for superhero fans. It hit that sweet spot between faithfulness to the source material and the cheeky humor LEGO games are known for. Remember, this game came out before the MCU became the juggernaut it is today. It was like a playground where all your favorite Marvel characters could hang out. The attention to detail was insane. Each character felt unique, with abilities that made sense for them. The game's open world New York was a love letter to the Marvel universe, packed with references and secrets that would make any comic fan giddy. It's wild to think how much the LEGO game formula has evolved since then. The recent LEGO game shows just how far they've come. But there's something special about the simplicity of LEGO Marvel Superheroes. It didn't try to be anything more than a fun romp through the Marvel universe, and that's why it works so well. With all the MCU hype these days, there's been chatter about a potential LEGO Marvel Superheroes 3. Imagine smashing through a LEGO version of Wakanda or causing mischief in a blocky TVA from Loki. The possibilities are endless. Even years later, I find myself coming back to this game. It's like flipping through an old comic book. There's always some new detail to discover, or some joke that hits differently. If you've never played it, or if it's been a while, it's worth dusting off. It's a reminder of a simpler time in both the Marvel Universe and LEGO games. Ninja Gaiden 2 is the gaming equivalent of a roller coaster that actively tries to throw you off. It's brutal, unforgiving, and absolutely exhilarating. The combat is like a deadly dance, fluid and precise. It's a far cry from the hand-holding we see in many modern games. There's been talk of reviving the series, especially after Team Ninja's success with Nioh. But could a modern Ninja Gaiden capture that same punishing magic? The game's violence was controversial back in the day, but it wasn't gratuitous. Every dismemberment, every splash of blood served to reinforce the weight of your actions. It made each victory feel earned. It's a shame that Ninja Gaiden 2 isn't easily accessible on modern platforms. There's a whole generation of gamers who've never experienced its unique brand of challenge. You can trace its DNA through games like Sekiro, but there's nothing quite like the original. The sense of accomplishment from finally beating a tough boss after countless tries is unmatched. It's like the game equivalent of climbing a mountain. Painful while you're doing it, but the view from the top is worth it. Hitman 2: Silent Assassin laid the groundwork for what the Hitman series would become. It's interesting to see how IO Interactive has evolved the formula over the years, culminating in the recent World of Assassination trilogy. With IO's upcoming James Bond game, you can see how the stealth and social engineering aspects of Hitman could translate well to a 007 adventure. Looking back, Silent Assassin was ahead of its time with its sandbox approach to level design. The addition of the notoriety system, which tracked how much attention you drew to yourself across missions, added a new layer of strategy to the gameplay. It encouraged players to be more thoughtful about their actions, knowing that sloppy work in one mission could make future missions more difficult. The game's globe-trotting story allowed for a diverse range of environments and assassination scenarios. It's fascinating to see how elements introduced in Silent Assassin, like the ability to blend in with crowds or hide bodies, have become staples of the stealth genre. The game's emphasis on replayability, with multiple ways to approach each mission, was also ahead of its time. Even now, with the series having evolved significantly, there's something special about the purity of Silent Assassin's approach to stealth and assassination. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time keeps popping back into relevance with talks of a remake circulating for years. Ubisoft has announced and delayed it multiple times, which is a shame because the original still holds up remarkably well. The time rewinding mechanic was revolutionary when it first came out, and it's influenced so many games since then. What really stands out about Sands of Time, even years later, is how seamlessly it blended its time manipulation mechanics with both gameplay and narrative. The Prince's ability to rewind time wasn't just a cool gimmick, it was an integral part of the game's identity, influencing everything from puzzle design to combat encounters. The fluid and acrobatic platforming set a new standard for 3D platformers. I remember being blown away by how the prince could run along walls and perform death-defying leaps. The game's Arabian Nights-inspired setting was a breath of fresh air, in an industry dominated by generic fantasy and sci-fi environments. The relationship between the prince and pharaoh was also remarkably well developed for its time, adding emotional depth to the story. It's interesting to note that while the Sands of Time trilogy concluded years ago, its influence can still be seen in many modern games. The recent trend of time manipulation mechanics in games like Quantum Break and Deathloop can trace their lineage back to Prince of Persia. Even the parkour systems in games like Assassin's Creed owe a debt to the fluid movement pioneered in Sands of Time. Sunset Overdrive seems to be experiencing a bit of a renaissance lately. With Insomniac's success on the Spider-Man games, there's been renewed interest in their back catalog. Rumors are swirling about a potential sequel, especially now that Sony owns Insomniac. It would be interesting to see how they might evolve the concept for modern hardware. The game's punk rock aesthetic and irreverent humor feel even more refreshing now in a landscape dominated by serious, realistic games. What really made Sunset Overdrive stand out was its commitment to fun above all else. The traversal system, which encouraged players to constantly stay in motion by grinding, wall running, and bouncing, was exhilarating. It turned the entire city into a playground. The game's weapon design was also a highlight, with each gun feeling unique and often hilariously over the top. It's interesting to note how Sunset Overdrive's DNA can be seen in some of Insomniac's later work, particularly in the fluid movement of the Spider-Man games. The game's fourth wall-breaking humor and meta-commentary on video game tropes were ahead of their time, predating similar approaches in games like Deadpool. While it was initially an Xbox One exclusive, its release on PC has allowed a new audience to experience its unique brand of chaos. The bold color palette and stylized graphics have aged remarkably well, looking vibrant and distinctive even years after its initial release. Mini Ninjas seem to come and go without much fanfare, which is a real shame. It had a second life as a mobile game with a runner-style spin-off released a few years after the original. There's been chatter about a potential sequel, but nothing concrete has materialized. The game's charming art style and blend of action and stealth could work really well on modern consoles. What really sets Mini Ninjas apart is its approach to the ninja theme. Instead of going for a gritty, realistic take, it opted for a whimsical, almost Studio Ghibli-like aesthetic that made it stand out. The game's environmental message, with enemies turning back into the animals they once were when defeated, was a nice touch that added depth to the world. I remember being impressed by how the game managed to create a sense of a larger world within its relatively linear structure. The ability to possess animals using Kuji magic was not only fun, but also added a layer of strategy to exploration and combat. It's interesting to note that Mini Ninjas was developed by IO Interactive, best known for the Hitman series. You can see some of that DNA in the game's stealth elements, albeit in a much more family-friendly package. While Mini Ninjas might not have been a massive commercial success, it's developed a cult following over the years. Bully remains one of Rockstar's most intriguing and underappreciated titles. Rumors of a sequel have circulated for years, with supposed leaks and teasers popping up now and then, but nothing concrete has materialized. It's fascinating to think about what a modern-day Bully might look like, especially given how much both gaming and school culture have changed since the original's release. What sets Bully apart from other Rockstar titles is its smaller scale and more personal story. Instead of a sprawling city, you have the compact but detail-rich Bulworth Academy and its surrounding town. This allowed for a level of environmental storytelling and character interaction that felt more intimate than the Grand Theft Auto series. The game's progression through the school year, with seasons changing and new activities unlocking, gave a great sense of time passing and your character evolving. It's interesting to note that despite its controversial reception at launch, Bully has aged remarkably well. Its commentary on school life and authority feels perhaps even more relevant now than it did in 2006. While Bully may not have achieved the same level of cultural impact as Rockstar's other titles, it remains a unique and beloved entry in their catalog, showcasing a different side of what the studio is capable of. And that's it, folks. If this trip down memory lane rekindled your love for these forgotten classics, hit that like button to help more gamers rediscover these gems. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching.